Device repairs can have a significant overhead for schools in terms of time and cost. So what we've looked at in this release is how we can help schools manage their costs and streamline their repair processes.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. You might be used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes of the podcast, but today I have something special for you. It's a bonus episode in partnership with VIZOR. I'm excited to bring you another special bonus episode on a Sunday. If we haven't met before, my name is Monica Burns. I'm a former New York City public school teacher, and I've been out of the classroom for a few years now, leading professional development for educators. I spent last week in Kansas City and have stops in South Carolina and Florida later this month too. Before we jump into today's episode, a quick reminder. You can head to my website, classtechtips.com/podcast for all of the show notes and resources from today's episode. And if you're listening to this episode on a podcast player like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, you should see a link in the description that you can click on as you listen today. It will take you to all of the resources we mention. This episode is sponsored by VIZOR. Does your district have a Chromebook one-to-one program? Are you struggling to manage your school district's IT assets in a spreadsheet? If you're tasked with managing hundreds or thousands of Chromebooks or other IT assets like iPads, projectors, and smartboards, you'll want to check out VIZOR. VIZOR is a Chromebook and IT asset management solution designed specifically for school districts. VIZOR helps schools keep an accurate device inventory, reduce workload with automations, and streamline device repairs. In time for the new school year, VIZOR has just released a major new version with over 60 new features to simplify device management in school districts. To find out more, visit vizor.cloud/Monica. That's VIZOR.cloud/Monica, or click the link in the show notes. Today's episode is titled, What's New for Managing Devices in Schools, a bonus episode with VIZOR. And I chat with Dean Bates and Jeff Lalonde from VIZOR all about device management, workflows you can automate, and how to prepare for the upcoming school year. I can't wait for you to hear our conversation full of insightful tips and things to consider if you use devices at your school. Welcome to the podcast today. I am so excited to dive into this topic of what's new for managing devices in schools. And before we get into all of the things together, I'd love to hear a bit about your roles in education. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Dean Bates and I'm head of marketing for VIZOR. So my day-to-day is having conversations with many school districts regarding the challenges they face managing Chromebooks and other IT assets. And the other part of my role is communicating strategies and tools such as VIZOR, which districts can use to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, that's similar, Dean, to Dean. So my name's Jeff Lalonde. I am the sales director with VIZOR, and my day-to-day includes very much the same thing, speaking with primarily technologists, but also educators and other resources within the K-12 space, teachers, media specialists, librarians, but mostly with technical folks inside of the K-12 space and sort of learning about what kind of pain points they have as it relates to managing their IT assets, and then discussing with them sort of how VIZOR might fit into those environments. So that's kind of what my everyday is like.
Well, both of your perspectives on this topic are so valuable. And I know Dean and I chatted a bit in Philadelphia at the ISTE Live conference just a few weeks ago. So excited to have you both on today to really unpack this idea of managing devices in schools. So I'm curious, what types of devices are you seeing schools invest in now? What are some of the challenges they face in keeping all these new devices organized?
So just in terms of, I guess, the challenges in keeping devices organized, the trends that we're sort of seeing these days has to do a lot with processes and kind of defining and maybe refining those processes. So that's the type of challenge I think that a lot of the districts are going through, is taking that next step in managing assets and sort of figuring out what specifically is needed to kind of enhance that and really refining those processes. And so I think from the perspective of non, as I mentioned to you off the top, Monica, in terms of speaking with non-technical staff, I think it's really important to be able to sort of start involving those non-technical staff. So educators, involving them in the process as well, being able to delegate a lot of the normally manual tasks that are associated with the technical side of managing those assets to non-technical folks and sort of recruiting them and being able to, offset their kind of, those manual steps, like I said before, to non-technical users. And that's something that I think is really being explored today. How can we sort of do that? But at the same time, obviously, it's really important for educators and non-technical staff to be able to continue doing what they're doing, what's most important for them, which is teaching. In the case of teachers, it's to be able to teach. But the simplicity, I think, of a solution like VIZOR, that, what VIZOR brings to the table in terms of allowing for non-technical staff to participate in the management of those devices, get them into students' hands very quickly and get back to teaching so students can get back to learning very quickly is sort of what VIZOR brings to the table. And again, that's something that I think is a trend in this space. The other thing is I mentioned the refining of those processes. So the ability to get deeper into moving away from a cost center, managing assets being very, very costly and very expensive, and sort of optimizing and maturing, I think, the process of the entire tracking and lifecycle management of these assets. And being able to start doing things like gathering analytics about where we're spending our time in terms of management so that you can start to focus on how do I improve that? So if you've got solutions in place that allow you to really dive deep into where am I spending my time with regards to managing these assets? How am I spending that time? Which types of assets are causing me the most time and are the most expensive for me to manage? And then addressing those things. So again, if you have a solution that can identify or help you identify those, then, weaknesses in your process, then you can start to address those maybe weaknesses, gaps, and those really costly spots so that you can start to fix those.
And as a classroom teacher, as you were talking, Jeff, I was thinking about the pain points in my everyday, right? And trying to make things work smoothly so I could focus on the teaching and learning component of my role. And I was just up in New York, I guess last month, talking to some district admin support level staff, and they were talking about this idea of setting up their teachers for success and getting everyone ready for the new school year. And so, Dean, I'm curious, could you share some of the trends you've seen, in device management in schools, and maybe for those educators listening, how those trends apply to them as we approach this new school year?
Yeah, I think as Jeff said, in recent years, we've seen some major shifts in terms of how devices are provisioned, maintained and utilised in schools. So, if we were to look back 10 years, then there was an awful lot of talk around bring your own devices in schools, whereas now the conversations tend to lead towards one-to-one in the classroom, using carts or supporting flipped or blended learning approaches with take-home one-to-one devices. So I'm pleased to say that our sort of latest release of VIZOR reflects those shifts and trends in device management and has really been led by conversations which we have with school districts. So in this release, the team has focused on 3 themes around helping districts maintain an accurate device inventory, reducing the workload of managing devices with automations, and streamlining the management of device repairs.
And can you tell us a bit more about this idea of the centralized inventory? Why is this so important?
Yeah, schools often face challenges centralizing all of their device data into one place. So often they have Chromebook data in one system, their iPads in another, these spreadsheets with Promethean boards and increasingly VR headsets and other assets in there. So to help with that, we've added some new integrations. So we now integrate with Microsoft Intune and Jamf. And this really complements what we've done previously, integrating with the Google Admin Console for Chromebooks. So now schools have a single place where they can see all of their early year iPads, their middle school and senior Chromebooks and staff Windows devices all together in one centralized place. And I feel it's important because you're not moving from one place to another and trying to maintain all these dispersed different data sources. So we've really worked together with this sort of new version of VIZOR to help centralize through these new integrations and complementing what we've done before with Chromebooks. We've also made it easier for staff and schools to upload spreadsheets into VIZOR with that asset data, again, keeping all of that data into one place. Another important aspect with regards to an inventory is keeping it accurate. So in this latest release, we've streamlined the user interface for allocating devices to students with barcodes. We've got a new functionality for bulk allocating devices, bulk checking in devices, I should say. So if you have 500 devices coming in at the end of the school year, you can bulk check those in to VIZOR. And it's easier, I should say, to identify devices which students have swapped. For whatever reason, students seem to have a habit of sort of trading devices. And so we can now sort of more easily identify those. And we've improved the algorithm we have with data coming from Google to help us there in terms of auto-assigning those devices out to students. So overall, a real focus on bringing all of the data into one place and ensuring that that data is accurate.
It's so interesting to think too, Dean, as you were talking, I was just imagining, right, all the different kinds of devices. And we talked about trends a little bit earlier. One of the things I've noticed over the past few years is that it's not just we're a Chromebook school or we're an iPad school or we only use this. It really is that mix of devices. And so having that centralized inventory that supports all those different things, like you mentioned, is so crucial. And, one of the areas that I've talked about a lot on the podcast and the blog this past year, and I guess it's kind of always been a theme here on both of those channels, is this idea of automating daily tasks, being efficient and saving time. And, I love automating daily tasks. It's a huge part of the way that I make the most of my minutes during the day. And I'm curious what type of workflows schools and districts can automate when it comes to device management.
Yeah, so we've implemented a new rules engine to help schools enforce and automate policies. So, for example, if a school has a policy where only one Chromebook or one device can be allocated to a student at one time, and they can now enforce that policy within VIZOR. We've extended our functionality around disabling lost Chromebooks for other rules. So, for example, if you want to disable Chromebooks of a certain model or brand because there's a security concern or they're past their AUE date, you can now define a rule within VIZOR once, and VIZOR will implement that rule for you. Another one of my favorite features is support for power washing devices. So power washing is Google's term for performing a factory reset on a device. So now within VIZOR, you can automate that. So if a loaner device is returned, and the next student gets effectively a clean Chromebook. So we all know Chromebooks over time tend to get maybe a little bit slower. So a power wash will clean that Chromebook, providing that user and with a nice sort of a clean device when it's checked in. And again, automating those sort of daily tasks. Jeff, I think there's a few examples in terms of automations which you've seen sort of school districts use.
Yeah, in terms of automating those day-to-day tasks, I think that's absolutely right. And so the ability, well, first of all, one of the things that I think, just in terms of trends and as we talked about before, sort of maturing kind of needs and ideas and what's next in this sort of management of these assets is bundling them together, right? So one of the things that we're hearing a lot from K-12 is from the space is the ability to tie those devices to other assets, right? So you're giving a student a Chromebook, but you might also be giving them a kit, right? So a carrying case or a protective case and a charger and that kind of thing. So VIZOR's new release actually allows for that management as well. So enhanced management of those kits so that when the student brings them back, when they're checked back in, you can verify it also that they've brought back all the things that were checked out with that kit. So not having to go kind of manually and say, yeah, they've got a Chromebook and they've got the carrying case. And so all of the individual things that were given, so you're tracking that sort of automatically and tying those things together. But also the ability just in terms of as we talked about before, the different things that you can do on a regular basis to automate and save some time. So this is maybe an everyday, but certainly every year when you're bulk checking in or bulk provisioning. So one of the use cases I had with a district recently was that they allocated specific times for grade levels to bring devices back at the end of the year, right? So this has just happened. And so they know that they've got, let's say, grade 5 was from 11 to 11:15. So they got like 200 devices that are sitting on desks. They know that all of those are from the same grade level. They can just scan those and bulk with one action, check them in, and then bulk set them to power wash or bulk set them to updating the user profile so that they're clean and ready to be distributed right away next year. So these types of tasks being automated and kind of speeding this up so that you don't have to do things individually is kind of what I think is really, really important for people now, just in terms of being able to continue doing what they're doing and deliver these devices very quickly and efficiently to students.
I love that idea of the bundles too, just a huge part of the automation of getting everyone what they need, getting everything back from everyone. And it kind of gets to this next question that I wanted to ask. And we spoke a bit about this on a previous podcast episode, managing device repairs and the importance of having a clear repair policy and set of procedures around this. So, can you remind listeners, what are some of the challenges schools and districts face when they're trying to keep track of device repairs?
Yeah, device repairs can have a significant overhead for schools in terms of time and cost. So what we've looked at in this release is how we can help schools manage their costs and streamline their repair processes. So VIZOR not only manages the repair tickets now, but also the parts which were needed for that repair. So this includes tracking the parts inventory, so how many replacement screens or keyboards do we have available, and the cost of those parts. Schools can also break down the repair costs by labour and then parts and service and charging back that cost to the families. So we see that's sort of quite common in some schools in terms of trying to recoup some of those repair costs. So we've simplified that for schools with a new fees API, and we integrate with a payment solution called InTouch as well, where schools can help recover some of the costs associated with those repairs.
Yeah, I would imagine having that component built in can just speed up the whole process and make it easier for families to get what they need in terms of getting that to a school or district. So yeah, just managing all of these little pieces that add up over the course of the school day, the school week, the school year. It's amazing to have everything in one place. And so, I'm curious as we think about this idea of what's new. We've talked about some of the trends. We've talked about some of the pain points and some of the solutions here. Can you share with us, about a little bit more about VIZOR's new releases and where listeners can go to learn more?
Yeah, so we've just released a major new version of VIZOR. So there's over 60 new features. In addition to the ones we've mentioned, then we can now track the number of repairs per student. So highlight students which have excessive repair requests and automate notifications and sort of reminding them of the responsible behavior, for example. And there's new user interfaces to make it easier for schools to look at multiple assets and repair tickets and navigate between those, and lots of new reporting functionality. So persistent ad hoc queries, support for Power BI, and exporting data to Google Drive, which, as we know, is sort of a common sort of repository for reports within the Google Workspace. So yeah, it's sort of exciting to share the new version and some of the features with your listeners. If they would like to find out more, then you can go to vizor.cloud. So that's VIZOR with a Z.cloud/Monica. We've got some more information about our new release there, and also what we do in terms of helping schools manage Chromebooks and those other key assets. And there's a promotion as well, a special promotion for Easy Ed Tech listeners on there too.
That's fantastic. And I'll link out, of course, for anyone who's listening right now so they can go and explore. As you mentioned, we've just touched upon a few of some of these big updates. So I know that someone who's listening today, where this has piqued their curiosity or that they know that this is something that their school or district has struggled with over the past few years, they're definitely going to want to go out and learn a little bit more about all of these pieces. So, of course, those links are there for anyone who's listening, but for someone who maybe is on the go and just wants another kind of a quick reminder where they can go to follow along, where can people connect with you both?
Yes, so our website is a great place to go. So I would use that VIZOR.cloud/Monica URL. I'm also on social media, but I think if you look at our website, that's probably the sort of the best place to go to find out more about the new release and what we do to help schools manage their Chromebooks and assets.
Well, Dean and Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing with us what's new in device management. And of course, anyone who's listening can click on the links and find out more.
Yeah, thanks so much, Monica. Appreciate the time.
It was lots of fun chatting with Dean and Jeff today, and I want to finish up today's episode, like we always do, with a few key points to make this EdTech easy. Establish an accurate, centralized inventory. Automate daily tasks. Set up clear repair policies and procedures. Review your device management goals. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode at classtechtips.com/podcast, including all of the ways to connect with the team at VIZOR. Again, a big thank you to our sponsor for this episode, VIZOR. In time for the new school year, VIZOR has just released a major new version of their Chromebook and IT asset management solution, with over 60 new features to simplify device management in school districts. To find out more about VIZOR and this exciting new release, visit VIZOR.cloud/Monica. That's VIZOR.cloud/Monica, or click the link in the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another favorite app, don't forget to hit the follow button. When you follow along with the podcast, each new episode will download for you automatically, so you don't miss a thing. And if you have a moment and are feeling extra helpful today, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. It helps other educators find this podcast when they're searching for topics like EdTech in their podcast app. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning for another new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast.